want to start off with just simply saying Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I think this may be our last news briefing for the year. We have next week Christmas, and then the week after that, recovery. So, well, no, I think we have New Year's, don't we? Most of you will probably be starting your New Year's early, I'm sure. I have a couple of things that I want to visit with you about today. One is an update on the Arkansas River. We've been receiving some responses from a few people concerned with what they've seen in the river. I want to let you know that the river's fine. Specifically, people have been concerned with what they've seen in the river, thinking that there were some contaminants and some foam. That's pretty common after a heavy rain. What we really are seeing are a lot of debris, the decaying debris, and a result of that debris is simply extra air mixed with water, which creates foam. I'm not a scientist, but I think we have scientists in this room that might have checked that out. So the river's fine. Certainly there's some more work that's going to be done on the river here very soon. I'm sure some more announcements to follow as we see some of that riverbank improvements getting ready to start here in the next few weeks between Douglas and First Street. So would still want to let people know, use caution when the river comes out of its banks occasionally, which it can still do after a heavy rain. I think it crested Sunday night. It can leave some debris on the walking and bike paths. So I know our folks are busy getting that cleaned up. The other thing I want to visit with you about, and it's received kind of a surprising amount of social media response, and that's the parking ordinance that's in Old Town. This parking ordinance specifically addresses backing into parking spaces in Old Town. A couple of things I want to let you know is, number one, that ordinance has been on the books for close to 10 years. So it's not something new. I don't know why it's getting all of the attention recently. I suppose because someone must have gotten... Lonnie, did you get a traffic ticket?
Is this citywide? Or just
No, it's not citywide, and we're going to talk about that. So it's really just specific to Old Town, and then one other spot up at 21st, the Nomar Center. And there's a couple of reasons why they instituted this policy not to back into spots in Old Town. One, primarily, is because it was doing a lot of damage to the Old Town parking garage and some of the walls and the shrubbery in different places. People simply were backing in too far and doing the considerable amount of damage onto the walls. And so once we implemented this ordinance, the damage seemed to subside, certainly, to all of that. The structural damage, the damage to other vehicles that we would see. And then the reality is, when you're backing into a parking stall, you're just as susceptible to hit a pedestrian as you're backing out of a stall. In fact, many times pedestrians are more prepared to watch somebody back out of a stall versus drive past an empty space and then come back into that space. And so we think that it still is relevant to have this ordinance in place, and as I mentioned, it's been in place for quite some time. That ordinance, in fact, defines that Old Town area, and it's been in place in some cases before all of the parking structures have been in Old Town. Part of that is some of the other areas that it would do damage to trees and shrubbery and that Old Town area besides just the parking garage, and then of course the 21st and Nomar space. So we would encourage people to adhere to that parking ordinance, be cognizant of the reason why it's there, and continue to encourage safe travels as we mix vehicles and pedestrians in that space that continues to gain attraction with Wichitans. So at that point, I will open it up for any questions that anyone might have.
What's the latest on the police chief?
I think we're going to hire one.
Good. How soon? Yesterday the paper was reporting that you've offered a job to.
Well,
employees.
And the reality is that was inaccurate reporting. So we are still working our way through the process. And, I will tell you this. I have spoken to all of the council members, and I've spoken to the city manager. And the manager and all of the council members have assured me that they're not talking to the press at all because there isn't any contract that's been offered. So when I suppose I could say when the importance of being first outweighs the importance of being right, it causes an issue. And so we need to make sure that the information is right, relevant, and we're happy to be timely. I can't imagine that it changes anything whether we report today that we've hired a police chief or we report Monday that we've hired a police chief. Don't think it changes anything in this community. So I would encourage all of you to allow the process to work its way out.
So just to be clear, has anyone been made an offer for the job?
Not yet. Working through some issues. So, any other questions?
Still
Thank-
hoping to have a chief named before the first of the year?
That is correct. And we're working our way through that process. There's a couple of steps that we have to get finished before we can finalize any kind of offer or contract. Both great candidates. And we think we'll end up with a good police chief. And I've seen some of the reports. I suppose if you have reported that we have hired a police chief, you had a 50-50 chance of getting it right. So, thank you all.